Every year, the city's anti-poverty agency, ABCD, holds an event to honor community heroes. This year's event, happening September 16th, will also mark the 50th anniversary of a commitment by the federal government in what it called at the time the War on Poverty. One other highlight of this year's celebration will be the induction of two heroes to ABCD's Hall of Fame, both of with us tonight, Sarah Ann Shaw and Hubie Jones. I'd like to thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you for having us.
Sarah, sure, take us back about 50 years, because this war on poverty, the creation of the Office of Economic Opportunity, sounds like something down in Washington, but this was a real game changer here in the city.
It was a game changer because it was in almost every neighborhood, well, particularly the neighborhoods that wanted it, like Roxbury, South Boston, East Boston, South End, and people flocked to it because there was a line that said, this program is going to allow maximum feasible participation. People who live in neighborhoods will be able to decide how this money is going to be spent on programs and things. And that was not quite true, but it really pumped people up that I'm going to have some say about what happens in my neighborhood. And ABCD, they started small and kept expanding, kept expanding. I mean, I remember I was working at ABCD when they had the first child or teen summer work program for kids. And there was no blueprint, there was no plan. And so we were down at ABCD, not the building they are now, but another one. And we were there some nights till 2 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out how we were going to make this program work, how we were going to hire the supervisors, how we were going to see if this child was eligible or that child was eligible. And that was while other programs were also going on. It was a crazy time, but it was a euphoric time in many ways.
Can we talk about how this changed the leadership equation? Because at the time in Boston, if you look at who got elected to political office, who was on the boards of all these institutions, I guess this was a complete contrast.
Well, first of all, ABCD is actually sort of implementing a big public policy shift in the country, and that is that the national government should do something about poverty. Because prior to ABCD, basically the poor were invisible, not recognized for the services and needs that they had. And with the coming of OEO, the federal government was saying, we're going to do something about poor people in urban cities as well as in rural areas. And so ABCD was a part of this whole movement. It was an extraordinary development because prior to that time, many social service agencies did not even exist in the neighborhoods that they were supposed to serve. They were down on Beacon Hill, they were in other places, so they were not services that were accessible to people in these neighborhoods. I worked for ABCD for 3 months in 1963 as we were doing the final planning for the Roxbury Multi-Service Center, which was established at 317 Blue Hill Avenue. And ABCD played a major role in bringing this major new institution into being, where you had a multiplicity of services under one roof for folks in the Roxbury and North Dorchester community. And it turned out to be a national model, and people came from all over the country to see how this was working and the impact that it had on the lives of people in a community like Roxbury and North Dorchester. So ABCD was there, and not only they were there to form the Roxbury Multi-Service Center, but at the same time they played a major role in the starting of the John F. Kennedy Family Center in Charlestown and SNAP, the South End Neighborhood Action Program in the South End. So they were a part of this development.
And East Boston.
And East Boston.
Dorchester.
Yeah.
And the thing you mentioned about what was that many of the agencies who were the supervisors were downtown. Many people in the neighborhoods didn't know that these downtown agencies even existed. I mean, they may have, if the meeting a social worker at a hospital or something, they may then have been sent to Family Service Association or to some other agency, but they didn't know about the variety of services that were available for them, and there was no venue and there was no plan, or there was no program to bring them in and make them aware of it.
Well, I think the other thing that happened through the Area Planning Action Councils, the APACs, were that local people in neighborhoods not only learned to speak up and have a voice and get services to come into their communities, but they developed political skills. So you have Gloria Fox, who was the head of the Roxbury APAC at one point, end up in the state legislature. You had Doris Bunty, who at one point was in a mother's club at the Roxbury Multi-Service Center, who just moved, gained political skills, and ultimately was head of the Boston Housing Authority and an elected official.
And Byron Rushing.
And Byron Rushing and a lot of other folks. So a whole lot of folks got political skills, got lifted into the political arena, and as a result of that, we see a whole different kind of situation today than existed.
Because, you know, Chris, there were actual elections. People ran in their neighborhood to be on the council, the Area Planning Action Council for their neighborhood. And people went around and asked people to vote for them. And so people who might not have been involved in the traditional political process, they started to learn what a political process could do for you, because they themselves were running to be a representative on the Area Planning Action Council, and after they were elected, then they went around and they sat down and they said, "What do we want in our neighborhood? What do we want?" And they planned programs that they felt would benefit their particular part of the city. And the problem was, though, that some of the programs that they thought should be funded, the government wasn't, like marching bands, for instance. There was a man who thought that there should be marching bands, and he was elected, and every meeting he would say, "Are we going to have marching bands?" And people would say, "Well, we don't think that that's going to be here."
Well, one of the things that's important is that ABCD had enormous staying power. There is probably no community action program in the country in its league. Many of them have gone away. Yeah. The other thing is that ABCD maintained its autonomy and independence. Yes. They allowed no mayor to come in and try to use this organization for patronage.
I want to ask you about it. I just read one of the histories here. In the mayor at the time, John Collins, rather strong mayor type, he said, he wanted this to be a handmaiden of urban renewal, keep the poor people from making a fuss. But I guess that's not exactly what happened.
No. Well, he had some of his people when ABCD started on the board of ABCD. There was an expose in the Boston Herald indicating that maybe John Collins was using this as a kind of a patronage haven. And it became a real big story. John Collins was getting ready to run for, nobody knew it, but he was getting ready to run for the United States Senate. And he said, so he pulled all his people out, and he basically said, "I'm not going to hands off. I'm not involved in ABCD. I'm not trying to do anything like this." And once he pulled back like this, ABCD shut the door, and never again was a mayor allowed to try to come in and mess with the autonomy of ABCD. It is a fantastic story. Of course, they had tremendous political skills. Bob Cord
was a genius.
Was a genius politically. He had the Speaker of the House, John McCormick, basically almost in his hip pocket, with a tremendous collaboration with him. So that they got money, but they also had protection. And so ABC was able to maintain its autonomy and its independence. And that did not happen for many community action programs around the country.
Sarah, and a lot of our viewers are familiar with the after part of your story. You became a reporter at WBZ TV, but what about the before part? Did community action change what you wanted to do with your life and what you thought you could do?
Well, to be perfectly honest, just before I became a reporter, I was running director of a community health education project. It was, in a sense, a forerunner of a health center. We were based at housing development in Roxbury, and our job, I had a staff of about maybe 10 or 15 people, and they would go and knock on doors and say, do you have a doctor? And if people said no, they said, well, we can hook you up with a doctor at Beth Israel, because this was another sort of anti-poverty program, I think. And they said, we'll hook you up with a doctor at Beth Israel. And when I had the opportunity, this was after I had worked downtown at ABCD and I still had connections. I was involved in 2 or 3 programs at ABCD, through ABCD. And when this happened, I was offered this job at WBZ, and I had to struggle with myself. Will I have more impact in terms of change for the community by staying where I am with this community health education project, or by going to WBZ? And I, being an innocent, frankly, about media, I took 4 or 5 months to make up my mind. I mean, nowadays, you could probably not even get the sentence out of your mouth, and someone would be sitting in your lap saying, yes, I'll take it. And that wasn't the case. And I really think I learned a lot about how to deal with people and how important. I felt community action was, and people being able to make decisions for themselves and making it known to the powers that be that these are some of the things we need in our communities. If we want our communities to thrive and develop, these are some. We need better schools, Operation Exodus. We need housing, Roxbury Action Program. So there were things that were happening that reflected what people wanted for their communities. And I credit my time at ABCD with sort of sending me ahead.
And if you look today, there are 130 nonprofit service institutions, organizations, in Roxbury, North Dorchester, and Mattapan. Extraordinary. If you look at the community development corporations that we've had in Roxbury, in Jamaica Plain, Urban Edges 1, Dorchester Bay, Madison Park Community Development, Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, these are some of the finest community development corporations in the country, getting fantastic results in transforming neighborhoods in terms of affordable housing, commercial development, and all of the rest. I would say that at the root of all of this is the work that ABCD started. It provided the vision, the opening, the direction, and in many cases the guidance. And ABCD is now, as I understand it, a $130 million a year annual budget. Incredible. It has it's enormous staying power. It's developed a brilliant business model, which means it'll have staying power. It owns probably 8 major buildings, okay, that provide it with income. I'm talking about downtown buildings. The building it owns at 178 Tremont, which is its headquarters, was purchased, I believe, for about $7 million at a time when the federal government told community action programs that there was a regulations that said you could not buy property with federal money. Well, they went to Senator Brooke, who they got to lobby for them, and they eliminated this this regulation, and they immediately bought this building. Today it's worth probably $35 million, okay? Because Bob Cord said, basically, it's ridiculous for us to be paying rent to other people when we can be paying rent to ourselves. So they now have 3 major buildings downtown, 2 on Chauncey Street, 1 on Tremont Street, in Roxbury, you name it. One on Shulman Street, where the Boston Children's Chorus has its offices. And it's a combination of serving, their people in terms of child care programs, Head Start and all the rest. And where there's extra space, it's at market rate for people who want to use it, and that brings in income. So that's sustainable economically.
Did you know that they had just, well, I don't know, I assumed that they completed the sale of a building on Warren Street.
I hear that that's in the works.
Well, I walked by the
More
building.
history to come. I'd like to thank you both, joined by Sarah Ann Shaw and Hubie Jones. We'll have more news in just a moment.